Hi everyone, in this video I want to talk about how our disadvantages or disability or loss or difficult challenges in life and why sometimes some of these can manifest in people's lives, and why is it necessary also sometimes to go through a challenging phase in life. So in my previous video we saw I was discussing in my previous two videos how a disability related issue likely caused or was part of the influence for a person who was physically disabled after an accident, and in that journey after his physical disability he likely needed some additional nutritional boost or something that pushed him towards going into creating a more green life in arid land in Mexico, leading to inculcating of some farming practices in a very arid climate in Mexico, and he has been successful in creating a home garden experience with the help of some other farming hands, all of whom together have jointly started now selling organic food in the local farmers market. So his challenge of physical health issue likely led him to do this. And then all the other workers who are also assisting him, they also likely might have had some life challenges that made them decide to do something different. They also might have had a service attitude inside them that made them choose to help a disabled person, and all of which combined, whatever were the set of circumstances needed for them to come together, help them come together in creating this uh, um, experience where in a desert also they have been able to create farming experiences. And of course in that previous video I have discussed some steps that they might still need to work on if they want to make the land even more richer than what it is currently, because they do have a potential to grow even further and improve even more to a really optimal condition that is possible given the circumstances of their land and the practices that they do on that land. So likewise, there is this other video of no, not video, but it's an article about this couple that I read now, which was also very inspiring because this couple has managed to create a home environment where their home has a AQI of 15 in a state which is in a place of India which is one of the most air polluted places of India. And this 15 AQI is actually much better quality air quality than the air quality we get in some of our very idyllic places in India as well, where usually their AQI and some of the most cleanest places of India, some of which I have traveled to in recent times, and many of those places had air quality of comparatively to the cities really good air quality, but their quality was around 60 or 50 or 80, and sometimes 45. But even in those places where air quality was showing up as 45 or 60 or 80, I found multiple reasons why their air quality there was still not healthy air quality for someone, for the local people there. And it was not simply because of direct air related functions that were leading to poor air quality there, but there were other unseen or unrealized things that can also lead to poor air quality, and which is what I want to discuss about this video, both the pros and cons of what is presented in this video, and also actually some other video related to some initiatives other people have done, partly similar to what this couple has done. So this couple's story tells that they have a poor air they improve the air quality inside their homes and they started doing those initiatives once the wife had been diagnosed with cancer. So when you have cancer, the thing that starts happening with cancer is you get physically very very challenged to do normal daily functions. So cancer is also a disability related condition, and that's why in US many a times you will see patients who look healthy like me and who look young, but who are, and you see them walking and doing grocery for a few minutes in the grocery store, and you assume that they don't seem to have any disability. Then why do they have a disabled card in their car, and why do they park closer to the store? And the reason for why some cancer patients are eligible for disability related cards is because you don't realize this about cancer, but the day your cancer is really highly active in your body and your environmental conditions are possibly very very health harming for your current physical health status, at the time even walking for 10 minutes or 15 minutes can become a extremely difficult chore. There can be days when you can't get out of the bed very easily. There can be days when your body is wrecked with so much pain that even lifting your own hands and feet can become a problem. There can be days when even going and taking a 10-20 minutes shower in the bathroom is a problem, when washing your clothes is a problem, when cooking food becomes a problem. And I went through all of these conditions when I was going through my challenging phases related to cancer and pre-cancer conditions that I have discussed in my previous videos. And the reason why I was not getting the right diagnosis also had a higher purpose. So because both not getting the right diagnosis or having some misdiagnosis related stages unfolded, and there were some nutritional challenges that was unfolding because my body was also shutting down from the conditions that were causing the cancer to develop in my body, but which hadn't caused the cancer to completely become a full blown cancer yet. But because I was facing both the cancer related challenge plus chemical poisoning related challenges plus some other life challenges that can also weaken your body's normal functioning, all of them combined together essentially made me at a weaker state than if I had actually at that point really full blown cancer or had all the symptoms of a full blown cancer patient. But that full blown cancer patient stage didn't happen with me because initially, let's say if my environmental chemical pollutants and other pollutants were causing my skin to be very irritated and highly allergic because of the chemicals in the environment, like it could have been chemicals in my clothes, chemicals sprayed in my environment because I'm doing pest control, or my neighbors whose air is going to come into my home, they are doing pest control, or if I am also cleaning my clothes and showering with all the chemicals that I talk about in my daily videos or regular posts of this channel. So in most of them I've talked about how if we use soaps and detergents and shampoos and perfumes, all of them have a high potential to cause allergies in us when something is already when our body is already at a heightened state of allergy, and that heightened state of allergy is reached by microscopic small amounts of over the years exposure of many things. And not just exposure, those things that I have been exposed to that my body was allergic to, if these started staying accumulated in my body due to other things going on in my body, like for example, let's say I am allergic to a perfume spray, and if there is no one in my work environment, home environment, social environment who uses that perfume, will I get an allergy to that perfume? No. And if let's say I got allergy also to a perfume that I don't use, knowing that I am allergic to it. But if I go to a party and there are 2 3 women who use that same brand of perfume, it could be the same brand that is giving me allergy, it could be one particular ingredient that is common to multiple brands that is giving me a allergy, it could be multiple sets of chemicals inside even a simple perfume that could be giving me an allergy. So I don't know specifically what is giving me an allergy, but it could be any of it. It could be one ingredient, two ingredient, 10 ingredients, and it could be a combination of ingredients. So if multiple women in a party and there's a party of 100 people, let's say it's some ceremony that is celebrated in India I went to, and they are using that perfume. So anytime I stay near the people who are using that perfume, or a person who uses such perfumes comes near me, whatever is my standard allergic response to a perfume will manifest. If my allergic response is sneezing, I will sneeze. If it is watery eyes, I'll get watery eyes. If after inhalation for 5-10 minutes I start getting headaches or dizziness, I'll start getting that symptom, right? And depending on what allergy symptom manifests in your body, you will get that. But when I have already, and when I'm inhaling something, microparticles of it is getting into my brains to cause this headache. It's not that I have applied the perfume or it's getting absorbed via my skin. I'm simply standing beside someone who has applied a lot of perfume. But perfume's qualities are that they are supposed to be, they have some evaporative content in them. So even though after, like, why do you think your perfume stays longer in your body? There are two elements to it. One element of a perfume, the sprayed perfume staying in your body, is because part of it is you've sprayed on your skin, right? So it is sticking to your skin, it has been absorbed by your body, and it has some long lasting things it might have that is causing it to stay longer on your skin and give that beautiful smell. But that beautiful smell that has been released from it, even if I'm not, like, really close to your hands where you might have sprayed it, or close to your armpits where you have sprayed a perfume, can a person at a social event smell a perfume while just standing like a couple of feet away, one hand distance away from someone wearing a perfume? How are you able to smell that perfume even though you are not, like, literally putting their hands near your nose? You are able to smell it not because of the component that is sticking to the skin, but the microparticles that is traveling in the air. And those microparticles of the sprayed perfume, or microparticles of the released perfume particles, is the thing that you are inhaling. And then after inhaling, those particulate matter which is going via your which gets in touch with your olfactory nerves and other nerves and other system of your nasal passages, is how it eventually disperses in your body to provide you with the allergic response. Because if it has gone into my sinuses, and even if I'm not wearing the perfume, it has the potential to still travel up my olfactory nerves and also travel up the sinus passages. And when it has some will travel up and some will travel down. The thing that travels down will give you a coughing response or a sneezing response if it is in the nasal passage area directly near your nose. But if it is traveled into via the nasal passages into your eyes, that's when you will get watery eyes. Even what is traveling via the air, part of it is getting inhaled by you, but part of it is also coming in contact with your eyes. That's why you get the redness. This is the same principle why when you have sprayed pesticides in the air, why after spraying pesticides in the air, even if you didn't directly spray it, but a municipality worker came and sprayed it, but if you were around in that area where the spraying was happening, even if you were like 5-6 feet away from the person who is spraying it, again microparticles of the pesticide is getting sprayed in the air. So despite you being 5-6 feet away also from the spray zone, some particulate matter which you can't see from the visible eye may still land up on your skin, on your eyes, and get inhaled by you, leading to all the different different pesticide poisoning related or pesticide allergy related symptoms. It becomes a pesticide allergy of just simple watery eyes or irritated skin when only minor levels of that chemical landed on your body. But when it has been like that, if every month pest control is being done, every 6 months pest control is being done, some of it or any of it that lands on your body or comes in contact with your senses, slowly after it has been inhaled or after it has been absorbed by a skin and eyes or hair, part of it, slowly, if our body has managed to detox it effectively, our organs systems were functioning really well, most of it might get processed by your body and eliminated by your body every time the body detects that a toxin is in contact, an allergen is in contact, and it will detox it from your body. And that watery eyes is a mechanism first to show that some toxin is coming in contact with you which is harmful for you, so that you stay away from the zone of the toxin. Secondly, the watery eyes, sneezing, everything, sneezing and watery eyes is also a mechanism, and even cough, these are all mechanisms to ensure that it gets washed away, expelled out. If some of it has landed in your respiratory tract or lungs via the cough, it is getting expelled out. Via the sneezing, it gets dissolved in the liquid of the sneezing materials, and then when it might get stuck with a little bit with mucus, it might get stuck a little bit with the water, and all of it is when it expelled, the mucus will be binding what? The mucus might be binding the lipophilic particles, whereas the watery sneeze is going to, and the watery eyes, the water in it is going to bind the water soluble particles. So if it is a pesticide which is both water soluble and fat soluble, when you cough up or sneeze, the fat soluble elements of it will also expel out. Whereas if it is just a water soluble toxin, then the water is the mechanism by which it will be expelled. But these are not the only mechanisms our body will expel. If over time, let's say, a lot of exposure from multiple sources are happening, at that time some organ systems are starting to fail. That is how you end up developing the organ damage related responses that can start happening in your body. And the first types of organ damages which will start happening might be liver damage or kidney damage, because like how sneezing and coughing will expel out some of the minor level toxins, when there is major level toxin that has been absorbed via different sources which I've presented in my previous videos, but it can come from your food, clothing, air, water supply, just environment of your home or outside your home, in work and in the places you travel to, in the vehicles you are traveling in. Wherever the toxin is getting absorbed or inhaled or ingested by you or drunk by you, all of these ways, it is slowly getting inside your body, and our body is trying to fight it. But liver has a particular capacity to fight a toxin. So if my liver has a capacity of today maybe eliminating at its peak health, when it is at 100% functionality, all the toxins that it is getting exposed to, it will be able to clear away. But in office, have you ever faced the challenging phase when in office you know this is the capacity you can do work in office, in a normal office life, but suddenly we get phases in our work life when there is peak work that we have to do, a lot of work we have to do. So at that time when our workload increases, can the liver expand and do extra work? A little bit it might expand. Like if you can clear 100 toxins in a day, and that's an example, like assuming that's the 100% functionality of the liver. If every day in normal life the liver is able to clear 100 toxins in a day, but slowly instead of 100 it is constantly getting 110 toxins to clear every day. Initially, maybe for 1-2 days, 1-2 months, 1-2 years, the liver might still try to stretch itself, which is what we do in offices, right? If let's say we are getting assigned some work by our boss and we are not the kind to say immediately no to it, and most people will be resistant to saying no initially, because we are most of people are very cooperative people, and we want to cooperate with our co-workers, cooperate with our spouses, cooperate with our family. So even if we are being stretched by them to beyond our limits, we will still continue being stretched a little bit for a while. As long as it is not impacting us too much, we can continue getting stretched a little. So if say my liver was at a healthy condition, and in a year, only once a year I'm getting some toxic exposure, extra exposure of chemicals that my body can't handle, my liver can take it. So if 360 days in a year my liver is exposed to 100 toxins or less than 100 toxins, my liver will function optimally. And the 5 days in a year when the liver is getting exposed to toxins that is more than the 100 capacity that the liver has, the liver will still take that. But the moment the liver is starting to get exposed to the more than 100 toxins every day, and it gets, and the script likely over time has got flipped, where instead of only occasional 5 days in a year I was getting extra exposure to toxin, right now my liver is getting exposed, or my body, and then eventually my liver is getting exposed to 110 120 toxins nearly every day, or more than, let's say, 300 days in a year. Then what will start happening, because my level of toxin exposure has now increased so much over time, over a long length of time, because from having exposure to 100 chemicals or less than 100 chemicals every day, to having exposure to 120 130 chemicals nearly every day, usually takes a time. It is not a one day experience. It can develop in a period of 10 years, and sometimes it can develop if you move from a less polluted country or city to a more polluted country or city, right? So that can start developing in our body slowly over the time of our exposure to a new place, and conditions of a new place, if much worse than an older place, will add to the toxic load in our body. So slowly over time, when liver will keep stretching for the first 10 days 100 days, maybe it stretched and it was okay taking this extra toxin. But when that stretching is continuing on continuously for a long time, what starts happening, and this is the indicator of liver distress, when our liver enzymes AST and ALT starts increasing in their numbers. Because when you do a blood test about liver function test, and you do the test related to seeing the what is happening with our liver enzymes, there's a normal range our liver enzymes should be in. But when it has started going beyond that normal range, it means liver now, because liver is not able to stretch itself anymore, slowly liver wants to increase the production of the enzymes which helps in breaking down these toxic particles. So whatever liver enzyme levels, that's why increases when the degree of toxins or degree of things harmful to your health, long-term health, are increased, and the liver needs the help of additional enzymes, so it needs additional resources to fight these toxins. So that's why initially the liver enzymes will also increase. So after the first 100 days of liver just trying to stretch it with whatever normal levels of enzymes it had, it will now start asking the body, give me more enzymes, I need more enzymes to fight this. So the body will now, our body is a very organic body, so it slowly alters and adapts to the conditions of life that is occurring in its daily life. So at that time the body will produce extra enzymes. So while it is now trying to produce extra enzymes, and your exposure of 110 or more than liver's capacity is continuing, and instead of now only having maybe 100 days or 10 days in a year where the chemicals were more than what the liver can process, now it's a regular occurrence, or 300-400 days of the year you are exposed to these chemicals. So the liver continues to want to increase the enzyme levels. But there will come a day when liver's liver is essentially at that time overproducing these enzymes. Body is overproducing these enzymes, or helping the liver overproduce these enzymes. So eventually there will come a day when the liver might start malfunctioning, or because of the direct attack only of the chemicals that are harmful for your body. Because when there is overproduction going on or overworking going on, and like how, when rust starts forming in a metal surface, in an iron surface, the more environmental conditions are worse around it, and that supports the formation of the rust, the quicker the rust will form, right? And how much ever you try to keep clean a nail which is getting rusty, like let's say you rub it off, or you use a little bit of oil to get the rust off of a nail that is continuously getting rusty. If enough environmental conditions are high that even daily wiping it with oil is not causing the rust to go away, it is because there are too many conditions going on that is causing the rust. Now your daily wiping of the nail is also not helping. So like that, if the liver now reaches that stage when how much ever it tries to fight all these toxins, the toxins are too much in level in the body, eventually, like a rust accumulation on a nail, that could be the chemical accumulation in the liver. And not just liver, it can accumulate in your skin, it can accumulate in your circulatory system, it can accumulate in your brains, it can accumulate any part of the body that is directly or indirectly involved in clearing out these toxins. Because when the toxins are not getting cleared out, they are by default, it means it is now starting to accumulate and back up in some organ system or other, or multiple places in the body. And depending on where it has accumulated, what harm that chemical can do. If it is a carcinogenic chemical, it can start causing cancer. If it is a chemical which is not carcinogenic but it can physically disrupt a body's functioning, then it will start giving you a organ system malfunction. If it is something which is only disrupting only one organ system, it can give you a cardiac disease or a lung disease, and a chronic one. And if it is something that is disrupting multiple organs, then slowly some people can also start developing multiple organ failure. So do you understand how chemical pollutants or pollutants and toxins that are misaligned with good health, if they're in higher levels in our daily life, can lead to or aid our dysfunctionality? And one of the dysfunctionalities could be cancer, like how this lady in this story had. So when she had cancer, now that some organ system functions are disrupted at a time, then what happens, depending on the cancer you have, if you have a real physical disability, you will not be able to move around, do a lot of normal functions. Daily functions like cooking will become difficult, daily functions like eating heavy food might become difficult. So cancer patients usually will also experience appetite loss. So when you are having appetite loss, and which happened with me, I had intense appetite loss, and instead of consuming like normal heavy 1 meal a day, 3 meals a day, because I had already I had mentioned in my previous video, because I stopped working in 2017-18, around that time I was not working. I stopped working voluntarily, professionally, because my work life and some personal things in my life both combined were tiring me out completely. So I got extreme burnout phase at that time, the kind of burnout, and not just burnout, the work was seeming like very futile work. Like even though it was under my capacity to do that work, it was not meaningful work, it was not I felt it was disrespecting what I know and what I can do. So I found that work to be, and not just disrespecting in the way in which what work I was given was disrespectful, but there was actual disrespect also in the knowledge that I have. The company was not respecting the knowledge I have related to where they were, let's say you're going wrong in a certain way, and this is the wrong way to do this thing, because you have that experience, technical knowledge, actual knowledge to know this is not the right direction. But the company was not ready to take that advice, simply because I was living in India. So they assumed that I do not know this as well as they possibly know. When it was the opposite, I knew, and because it was a startup, many people in my company were all younger people who had much less experience, much less level of education also to understand and the context of what I was saying. And as a result, either they had less knowledge, less education, less experience, or less understanding of the context of where I was going. As a result, I found it very disrespectful. So slowly universe only, it was a very universe guided thing, that circumstances, it was like a perfect storm happening in my life, such that I realized that how much ever I get paid, I will just not be able to do this work anymore. Because it was mentally also getting very distressful, because let's say you have a capacity to do 100 things and they are only asking you to do 10 things, and when you do the 10 things really well, they are not appreciating or understanding the value of those 10 things done really well. So then you get frustrated at two levels. Both your logical brains also get frustrated, but your emotional system also gets frustrated and burnt out, because it's a burnt out of a negative kind, where what is valuable is being considered as something nonsensical or something irrelevant. And then the challenge was that it is a very frustrating experience if people do not understand why a particular thing is a wrong thing to pursue. And because that was becoming challenging for me, and then some personal life things started cropping up, all of them combined exhausted me completely. It is because it's very exhausting to try to convince people sometimes that this path, if you take, will be dangerous. And the reason why I'm doing it partly is because I know this is, if you take this path, it will lead to failure. Partly from my experiences, partly from my understanding of the situation. But the second thing why it becomes frustrating and exhausting is because there are people, if it's like a Sisyphean task, like let's say there is a Sisyphus who is taking a stone and going uphill again and again. When you go with the hopes that this time he will go up the slope and keep the stone in the slope and be able to finish his job. But let's say that Sisyphus, who is taking a stone up a mountain, doesn't know that the reason why the stone is not staying at the top of the mountain is because maybe he's climbing up the wrong mountain. Maybe the place in which he is putting the stone is a place where the stone can't be put. Maybe he was actually not the person who was supposed to also do this task. So if you are not the right person to do a task, sometimes your tasks can fail if you're not the right person to do the task. And all these three circumstances were happening in my company, where people who don't know what to do were doing a task that they were assigned, simply because they were assigned that task. And instead of refusing to do a task that they don't know anything about, or admitting that I do not understand this conceptually as deeply as I should, and letting someone who does understand it conceptually how to do it in the more right and aligned ways, they were not allowing that, and that creates a needless resistance, right? So because of that resistance to people understanding that they are wrong for that task, that was the issue. People not understanding that if you go up a hill, that is not the right path to take for the future success of a company. And you're not able to perceive, you may not be able to perceive because you have less context, less experience in that field. But someone who has already had experience in that field, who has a better context, and all they had to ask in order to get the better context was to ask some deeper questions. But some people do not have the capacity. If someone tells you not to go down this path, if you're resistant to their advice, you can always ask them deeper questions to understand why are they giving me advice of not climbing this hill. And they would have given you the reason, all the logical reasons as well as the intuitive reasons possibly. But if you have the capacity to understand their logical and intuitive reasons, then only you will not go up the hill. But if you do not have the capacity to understand, then what will happen, or you do not trust the person who is giving you that advice, you will continue going up a hill you were not supposed to climb, or you will go up a hill where that stone was not supposed to go. So this is how the failure happened. So same way in in Delhi, that is what has been going on with all the different policies that are being implemented there to combat air pollution, without people understanding the deeper reasons as to why air pollution is happening and the deeper steps people have to take to reduce the air quality to a level which is manageable and healthy level. Which, because this wife had cancer, she could likely have had tiredness, she could have had breathing distress as a result of the cancer weakening her body and circulatory system. If she was going around anywhere in the Delhi environment, she, like even just to go to her doctor's appointment, while going to the appointment in the car, also maybe in a car or a taxi that they were hiring to go to a doctor, or whatever vehicle they were taking to go, all of these environmental conditions were related to air pollution was emerging for them, which was the pain point for her. And because it was a pain point for her, they decided to take measures to reduce the air pollution in at least their home environment, because that is the thing they have the control on. They can't control Delhi's air quality, but can they control their home air quality? So that was what the first measure they started doing possibly. And what is the best way to control your air quality in your homes? Grow more greenery, grow more plants. And there is a false way to do it, and there's a clean way to do it. What is the false way? The false way, I have also done it, and I realized how false and futile that way was. I tried growing plants also. My plant growing was getting stopped because of air and water pollution in that area. But my second alternative was, instead of growing plants, I also bought air purifiers, which is what in Delhi people are trying to do. They are trying to build large scale air purifiers in different parts of the city to allow the air purifiers to absorb all the toxic particles or in the air. And but air purifiers being a machine that is purifying the air, what will happen when you have created a machine to purify the air? It will require constant maintenance. So while building up of those units will take a large amount of money, even sustaining those units will take a lot of money. And then after those, like, have you seen a simple air purifier inside your car or inside your home AC? Those simple air purifiers also need a net like thing that will collect all the particulate matter that is impurifying your system. So that collection of the impurities that is going to happen in the filter that will be given in a air purification system, that filter has to be constantly replaced. The machine that is during the purification also has to be constantly upgraded. So you have added to a lot of future finances, which will be avoidable when actually in your practice you are doing things that are more supportive of keeping air quality clean. So instead of, and when I bought a air filter, the machine was not working that well. The filtration device was likely not set up in it really well. I realized also eventually that even if that had been a air filter which was capable of filtering things really well in my home environment, eventually it would have failed, because in the sense I would have to constantly keep replacing the filter and constantly keep adding to earth pollution, because every time you are changing the filter, that filter is adding to earth pollution. So we are now compounding the problems instead of reducing the problems when we do measures which are not aligned with the right measures to solve a problem. But this couple got guided to do some right measures to solve the problem. So they created fish tanks, and she was also, because when you get cancer you will have high inflammation, your body will feel very heated up, and the inflammation will make you very uncomfortable. You need some cooler circumstances. And again, the way in which most of us combat the inflammation and cooling that we need is by eating cold food, or if by staying in AC controlled rooms. But again, if their AC bills were increasing, if they realized that with the filtration devices constantly they have to keep changing the filters, because I'm sure they might have tried all the wrong practices also at first to combat the problem they were facing, but those wrong practices were not working for them. So So then eventually they decided to keep the home environment cool by creating fish tanks. They did some scientific research, intuitive research, all of them combined got them to do aquaponics farming, or something called as hydroponics farming, where water is used for raising vegetables. Water with the right nutrients are used to grow vegetables or plants in your home environment, and which has now resulted in their home, because they are growing a lot of greenery in their home, that greenery has resulted in the reduction, that greenery itself is proving to be a good barrier against pollution in the environment, and giving them good air quality because of the oxygen levels in their home environment. But is it just the greenery that is protecting them from the outside elements that add to air pollution? Partly, and the inside element that is adding to air pollution. Partly true that the greenery is giving them more oxygen. Greenery is possibly acting as a physical barrier also to the outside air elements that can pollute the environment. But what else is going to stop air pollution from happening in your homes? Another thing that can stop air pollution from happening in your homes is when we reduce cooking. Because when you get cancer, you are having appetite loss. You will be tending to eat more liquid based diet. You will be tending to not use like high intense cooking. You are also going to be, depending on the cancer you have, some of your therapies will suggest you to have lighter meals. You will not have like let's say earlier 10 years before she had cancer, they are Punjabi, right? So I am assuming, because I have met typical Punjabi friends, I'm assuming they might have eaten a lot of non-vegetarian food also in their diet. So they might have been having chicken, mutton, chole, all the heavy proteins in their diet were likely there. Heavy proteins, heavy vegetarian and non-vegetarian food, a lot of greasy and oil filled, all these like very heavy food they might have been consuming initially. But when you're getting appetite loss, or when you have certain kinds of cancer, some of these greasy food, heavy protein based foods will also start becoming very difficult for you to digest and process. So when they are doing this hydroponics and to reduce inflammation, when I went to a Ayurvedic doctor, the Ayurvedic doctor had, at the time I was in the pre-cancer, like cancer was not showing directly in my reports, it was showing that I could potentially have cancer at that point of time in the reports, but direct cancer diagnosis measures were not completely there in the initial testing done. So the reports could indicate I have either anemia or inflammation or cancer. That were the three potential diagnoses I could have. But initially I knew I didn't have anemia, because anemia related things were not happening in my health, and I knew it was definitely heightened inflammation, because inflammation related things were happening with my health, because I had also heightened allergies to multiple chemicals and other particles in my home or daily life that I was doing, that were increasing my allergic responses to food, clothing and environmental toxins. So because my allergic responses, and initially when you have milder allergies, while like how I mentioned in the beginning of the video, you will only get sneezing, watery eyes, headaches or cough or skin irritation. These are the initial allergy symptoms, but or symptoms when allergy is at a very minor or moderate level. But sometimes all of these symptoms, plus if other deeper level of allergic responses are developing in your body, that's the time when inflammation will start happening, because your body is fighting the allergens. Again, allergen is something, allergen can be a particulate matter, it can be a chemical, it can be a microbe, it can be a combination of different things that our body knows is harmful to us, so it's charging a defense mechanism against it. And when the defense mechanism is charged against it, our immunoglobulin levels will also increase in our body, and when immunoglobulin levels are increasing, you have inflammation. And when you have inflammation, when only the immunoglobulin that is related to the allergic response defense mechanism is in heightened states, then you have only allergy going on, heightened allergy going on in your body, and treating the allergy will fix your problem. But if your inflammation and heightened immunoglobulins is not simply because there's an allergen in your body, but because now the exposure to multiple allergens may be possibly for many years of your life, because cancer doesn't develop in one day. Cancer takes 10-20 years to develop in a person's body. So if over the 10-20 years of my life I have had a lot of exposure to carcinogenic chemicals in different places, all the chemical exposures from different kinds of carcinogens finally has attacked my body in a way leading to cancer, so my inflammation will be also high because of the cancer. So that's why there is this three potential to have the kind of blood reports I had. And while taking allergy medications would have solved the problem when I had only allergy. But if because I didn't have only allergy, and because the cancer was developing in my body at that time, eventually when I did some additional tests, I realized that I did have potentially some cancerous things developing. And by the time I was because the allopathic measures were not helping me in diagnose the thing correctly, I had got guided to go to an Ayurvedic doctor. And when I went to an Ayurvedic doctor, they did at least acknowledge that I have inflammation based on their diagnosis. And for the inflammation, green leafy vegetables was a good solution. Green vegetables, green dal, all of these were part of the measures to help you cool down your body. Because if you, and they asked me to avoid eating red vegetables, and one of some of my favorite foods to consume prior to that were all many acidic foods and many red and orange colored foods. So I used to eat capsicum, I used to love eating carrots, I used to love eating beetroots, I used to love eating many red colored foods. But most of those red and yellow colored foods, tomatoes, all of these or many of these which are acid causing, they asked me to reduce eating that and increase eating the green vegetables. So if she also went to someone who suggested this, or her diet was suggesting, dietitian was, nutritionist was suggesting this diet, when you do the hydroponic farming, you will see, if you look at their picture also in that link that I'm going to send, you will see that most of the hydroponic farmings, or if you have looked also in hydroponics farming, you will see that the kind of vegetables that are usually grown in hydroponics is the green leafy vegetables. So these green leafy vegetables can grow very easily in very watery conditions, and with the right nutrient content, you can succeed as a hydroponics farmer. And after having success with it, they were trying to do the farming to meet their food needs possibly, because why would she have started growing her own vegetables? The same problem that I had, that when I'm buying food from the market, I don't know which day I am going to have. And this is where the cancer, when I said some days I can't even walk for 10 minutes, and then there are some days I can walk easily for half an hour. Which days can I walk easily for half an hour? If I'm eating good organic food, and have good quality clean water, good clean clothes, everything is relatively cleaner or much cleaner in my environment that day or that week, I will walk very easily, I will breathe easily, I will easily be able to do 1-2 hours of outside home functions and inside home functions. But the days when immediately, because if the cancer has not completely recovered, or you are still recovering from your cancer, or you are simply at a weakened health status because too many environmental toxins were weakening you, all of these times, if you consume a lot of pesticide laced, chemical laced, chemical contamination, microbial contamination laced food, you will end up harming your health. So if she was seeing an obvious pattern, if she observed this, or if her husband and other family together jointly observe that whenever they are buying certain foods from the market and they are consuming that fruits and vegetables, they are having some health issue, if they observed it, that could have also pushed them towards doing a farming where they can now have a control about the quality of food they consume. And I'm sure when they are doing these right steps to align their health into a better way, they now started seeing, that's why they started seeing success, because raising their own vegetables was a beneficial measure, both from the health perspective and from the perspective that now that you have fresh green leafy vegetables, what will you be consuming more with the green leafy vegetables? You're more likely to consume salads, you're more likely to use these as a herbal measure for detoxing your body, you are more likely to and just the greenness of the vegetables will keep the environment cool. So the water plus the vegetables is keeping their home environment really cool, at 15 degrees Celsius, which is like a really amazing climate that you only get in India, in the hill stations of India. You don't get 15 degree, or during winter time in certain normal states of India you might get 15 degrees as a climate. Otherwise 15 degrees is a climate that is nearly impossible for most of India, not especially in Delhi, where in the summer times their climates can be 3-4 times more than what they are experiencing in their homes in the summer. And that coolness is because, and this is the reason why I'm making this video, that this video shows how greenery and water both are necessary actually to reduce the climate crisis related to those places where overheated conditions are happening. And if you have seen certain videos now in some desert like regions of the world, currently rains have started occurring in those regions. The reason why rains are occurring in those regions currently, even though those places were deserts for 10-20 or years, or maybe more than a century of the existence of that area. So when deserts have been there in existence for a long time, because human activity has been less in those areas, now the desert conditions, and if there are parts of the desert where no one has lived for centuries, those places could be those places where lots of rains are happening, because now the area has cooled down enough for rains to occur and create a environment for the future for that area to start becoming fertile again. The soil has got enough rest from lack of human activities, that whatever soil is there underneath the sandy area of that place, that underneath the sandiness of that area, those deserts are slowly being primed by nature to become again a fertile land for raising trees, growing plants. And if no human goes to those areas, those places will naturally start developing a local vegetation. But if humans do end up going to those areas, then humans can take advantage of the conditions that are coming in existence in a desert to help in creating converting a arid land into a fertile land of the future. And there are also places of the world where heavy rains are happening, where it may not be a desert, or it might be a desert where heavy rains are happening, but every place where, if habitation is there, or people have been existing in that area for thousands of years or hundreds of years, and a lot of population is there in those areas, when extra rain, unexpected rains are happening, they are actually warning signal from the universe about something that is going wrong in the ecosystem of that area, that the human activities have to fix, the humans living there have to fix. If they don't fix it, then some natural calamities might start happening there, deeper level calamities can start happening. And so when rains are excess or unusual, excess rains or unusual rains sometimes can be a blessing, and excess rains and unusual rains sometimes can be a curse. Similarly, diseases also, for most of us, we consider diseases to be a curse, but some of those people who are getting the diseases or disabilities, that can also be considered a curse. Loss can be considered a curse. Not getting a right diagnosis can be considered a curse. But sometimes those same things that can be considered something very difficult difficult and very challenging can also end up being your blessing, because you can end up learning to do something in a very different way than what is normalized by the people there. But that different way is what is the real solution to the problem there. So if multiple families and or multiple groups of communities in that area of Delhi where this couple lives, if they start following some of the practices that this couple is following, and not just mimic exactly what they are doing, but also start thinking of improvising that the couple has already done, they will go towards a better, cleaner earth and better, safer, cleaner Delhi than the Delhi that is currently present in most of other areas of Delhi, right? And the other thing I want to talk about, this is all the blessings of what happened to this couple as a result of the trouble of going through the challenges related to cancer. But in those challenges related to cancer, if you're very sick, you're not going to do heavy cooking. So that heavy cooking, if they have stopped the heavy cooking, they're not doing like earlier maybe she was eating 3-4 meals a day, or they were cooking 3-4 meals a day of paratha. I know some Punjabis, so I know the diets they can have. Sometimes you might have really heavy oil or ghee infused parathas in the morning, heavy bunch of rajma chawal, dal chawal, roti and other things in the afternoon, same in the evening, and in the late afternoon with chai also you may want to eat a lot of pakoras and multiple heavy oily foods we Indians tend to have. And you will also see the pattern of those places and cultures where you tend to eat a lot of oily food and very rich food also develops in your culture when actually food pollution is high. And I might talk about this food pollution correlation. I need some extra information to talk about it. Intuitively I know this happens, but to explain it I will take a little while to explain regarding the food pollution correlation with eating heavy or greasy food in possibly a next video. But because that pattern of heavy food eating habits has developed in certain people, when you do get cancer, that heavy food eating you just can't do, your body stops doing it. And now women being the caretakers, homemakers, cooker, the person who is responsible for doing much of the cooking in the family, what has happened in their life, she being the cook, she being the person who did majority of the cooking activities or at least monitoring of the cooking activities, means that when she felt sick they had to come up with an alternative of easy cooking, light cooking, cooking that is not this heavy and intense. And her husband was possibly adjusting enough and understanding enough about her dietary requirements, so they both shifted their dietary requirements into lightly eating lesser intense meals. And if he hasn't shifted, he should possibly think about doing that if he hasn't completely shifted into eating lighter meals. But if both of them or anyone who lives with them, all of them jointly shift into eating lighter meals, they will see their health will improve in other ways if the lighter meals are all nutritionally supportive of their current activity level. Because in my previous videos, even when I actually was trying to mention my job, not because of the job related things, but it was partly relevant, that's why God made me diverge into that area. But the reason why I was mentioning my job was when I used to do intense job, 10 hours, 8 hours jobs a day, at that time my brain output and energy output is high. And when my energy output is high, my caloric intake also has to be high. So that's whenever I used to do a job, and in US I used to have this alternate work days. So 2 days of 12 hour works, then 1-2 days of no work, then again 2 days of 2-3 days of 10-12 hour work. So like that my shift used to be. And because I had this shift paradigm, the days I had 12 hours work, I had a more caloric intake than the days when I didn't work at all. And because I also was living by myself, I didn't have any roommates, I was not married to anyone, so majority of my work life on the days when I didn't have work, I was just simply chilling like a person with no responsibilities. And I had responsibilities related to grocery shopping, going to the gym, taking care care of my health, taking care of my car. These were the responsibilities I had, but I also had the free time to study. I had the free time to participate in other courses, occasionally do some hobbies. So this is what I was spending the rest of my time, right? And in that rest of the time, when and because I didn't have any personal human connection, deeper human connection at that time, those 2 days when I didn't have work, what was I doing? One of those days I would just simply rest, because I worked 24 hours continuously. Now my body wants rest, so I would completely rest, hardly do any very heavy intense work. And the days when I'm not doing any heavy intense work and I'm just cooking for myself, I'll cook very light meals, and I do not need high calorie food. So my body got adjusted also to eating low calorie food. I do not consume actually a lot of high calorie food that many Indians consume. And I had some childhood related reasons also. When my mom was sick at that time, she also didn't used to cook a lot. So since childhood days actually, I've been used to actually eating only two main heavy meals and one lighter snack, like either breakfast or snack like tea time snacks. So 3 meals a day, 2 heavy meals and 1 snack like meal is what most of my life I have existed in. Sometimes it has been 2 heavy meals and 2 lighter meals. So my breakfast used to be very light, even though there are so many protocols which say that you should have a heavy breakfast in the morning. Because I was going to school and college, I felt my brain was more active when I didn't feel it, but now I'm realizing it. The reason why my I didn't sleep through the classes is because my brain, I would eat very light meals in the morning. So my morning breakfast many a times during my college days and even 10th 12th related school days were days when I ate only a banana and went to school, or I drank a glass of milk and went to school and college, or I didn't even consume any banana, any milk. And only when we had breaks between classes at around 10 o'clock, some days I would go to the canteen with my classmates to have a bowl of dahi vada, or not dahi vada, medu vada sambar, something like that I would eat. So I would have a little bit of protein, I would have a little bit of vegetables in that diet. And again, medu vada sambar is medu vada is a little heavier food, but the sambar is very light food. So essentially my most breakfasts were alternating always with lighter breakfasts, or much lighter breakfast than even medu vada sambar, because some days until 1:30 I would not eat only anything except like one banana, 1 cup of milk. That's it. So this is how I have lived all my life in since my 20s or teenage years. So my body is used to having lighter meals in the morning, and sometimes when people force me to have heavy breakfast, like I have cousins who eat very heavy meals because they used to have a school timing where their grandparents or their parents used to force them to have a full meal at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then they will go to their school around 11 o'clock 12 o'clock and have a whole school day. So in the morning they were having a whole lunch like meal before they left for school. But because of that, because they're having a whole lunch like meal before they left for school, their caloric intake is much high, 2-3 times higher, 2 times at least higher than what my caloric intake is. And the advantage of that is, when I got cancer, I can still survive with low calorie meals. Whereas that same person who's used to a high calorie meal, for them when they have cancer, it might be a little bit troublesome. But the disadvantage is, because I eat low calorie meals and I have eaten low calorie meals throughout my life, or I eat less food than what generally you can perceive is the normal people might be consuming in a particular country. At that time, while I'm eating a less calorie meal, the disadvantage is that sometimes I may have more nutritional deficiency, and that's why my cancer will develop sooner also than a person who is also going through the same cancer like condition as me. But because they are eating more nutritious food, their cancer will take later to develop. So like, I and 10 family members are there who consume much more nutritious food, or their distant family, they consume more nutritious food. They also have the same cancer conditions in their environment. while my cancer started developing in my 40s, their cancer started developing in their 60s or 70s, right? That will be the difference. So this woman, when she got the cancer which has reduced possibly her cooking activities, now once she recovers from cancer, if she again resumes back and you will feel more hungry after your cancer is getting treated or is remission slowly from your body, clearing away from your body, and you are becoming healthier. At that time, your appetite loss that was there previously, it will go away and you will again start feeling very hungry. But at that time, I would suggest that remember that because firstly you went through cancer, and secondly because a few years might have passed, a decade might have passed. Now if you eat the same level of food that you were consuming when you had and let's say they both retired and they are doing all these activities in their home life after retirement, so that's why the husband was likely able to participate in all these functions in the home life. Why? Because he was retired and he was able to help her in her observe her more, become mindful as a spouse, to do this jointly together, right? So because all of these what they were doing, some of it was stemming from her health need, but some of it was also stemming from his need to do something after retirement. Some of it was also stemming from his need and empathy towards his wife's condition, and also in wanting to resolve the pollution problem of that area, the heating problem of their homes. So all of these combined led to drive him also. So the negative conditions of their life and the free time they had in their life led them to do all these activities, right? And while doing it though, now with hydroponics, while hydroponics is being globally touted as a very great alternative to raising vegetables, definitely hydroponics based food is much more cleaner than a pesticide laced soil based food farming, right? So if you have pesticides in your soil and you grow the same green leafy vegetables in the soil or other vegetables in the soil, they will be having pesticides in them, and that's why they will be toxic for consumption. So that's why hydroponics is better. But there is a second element to hydroponics that I have faced, and because in some of the I was exploring restaurant food, so when I was eating restaurant food, and sometimes in some of these restaurant foods they were getting organic food, I could realize that, but I was getting mold smell in the food, and that's when I realized the mold problem, and not just simply from tasting a mold based green leafy vegetable that I realized that it is possibly a hydroponics based raised green leafy vegetable. But the other thing was, I looked at videos of hydroponic farming, and in all hydroponic farming, less sunlight is present in hydroponic farming, no soil is present, and because less sunlight is present, more damp atmosphere is there, so only water and air and adding nutrients to the water is how the farming is done. But in those conditions, so some people do hydroponic farming inside closed quarters where no sunlight is there, or some people are doing hydroponic farming where mild sunlight might be there, but maximum sunlight exposure is not there in their environment. So at that time, when you're reducing the exposure to your sunlight also, that also naturally cools down the homes, which is also what this couple might have faced, that if she was having inflammation and heat related problems, they might have been successful in their hydroponics by keeping the sunlight exposure a little less in their environment where they were growing these vegetables. But if there is too less of sunlight present, then the ideal conditions of mold starts building up in your environment. And initially, if light amounts of mold is there in your home environment or in your vegetables, it does end up being a little beneficial for your health, because mold is a cooling thing. Mold or fungus growth can cool your body. So about fungus poisoning and mold poisoning I'll talk about in the next video. But one symptom, if you are developing mold poisoning or fungal poisoning, is that you will get intense chills and coolness in your body, which happened to me when I was getting exposed to fungus and mold in my home environment and in multiple places, not just simply in my home, but I have also gone and lived in, when I was traveling, I was doing the hospitality industry related experiences I've mentioned in some of my videos. So at that time I've stayed in homestays, I've stayed in cousins' homes, I've stayed in good high class hotels as well. So all of them combined, and sometimes really bad hotels also have stayed in, but everywhere where mold poisoning is there, in your homes, in the hospitality industry, in the food delivery industry, that mold consumption also, like how excess amount of chemicals can lead to particular kind of health harm, excess amount of mold in your environment can lead to some other kinds of health harm as well. So for this couple, I would suggest, while whatever they have done has been successful so far, because that was a much needed condition needed for her and him to have good quality air and good quality lighter and clean foods in their home life, they should try shifting to not just hydroponic farming but mix hydroponics with a little bit of regular farming practices as well, as they are becoming healthier. And also realize that if they are starting to get these chills and shivers, and do research work on the mold poisoning related symptoms, you may realize if mold is growing in your homes, how to combat it. A little bit of mold is okay, but when the mold is really high levels, it can end up causing a lot of health harm as well. So right balance, because in nature, right ecosystem, right balance of everything is needed. So even molds are needed, even otherwise molds wouldn't exist on earth. Like how bacteria are needed, mold is also needed for farming actually. But if there is too much mold and too less sunlight to clear, the mold can only be cleared in a home environment when you have a right amount of sunlight penetration in that home environment, then mold exposures will be low and mold content will be low. And the second place where mold is good for the mold can be combated is when you have cross ventilation going on in their homes. So now their home has more likelihood of having some mold going on, because while they are keeping their air quality really well by doing the measures that they have done around their homes to keep it in a naturally cooler setting, they are also likely, in order to combat the high level of pollution outside their home, while in their homes the AQI is 15, a few meters away from their homes the AQI might be 40, but a few kilometers outside their home the AQI is going to be the Delhi's normal AQI of 30, 300 or 250 or whatever their area's AQI is, right? So at that time, because to prevent the outside particulate matter to come inside their homes, they might be keeping their windows closed, so the cross ventilation might not be happening even if sunlight is present in their home environment. Like some Indian homes have good penetration because of the way our windows are designed, the way the buildings are designed. Some homes get really good sunlight penetration, whereas certain other homes don't get good sunlight if their windows were placed in a way which was misaligned in the way the sunlight should enter. So because modern architecture has forgotten that sun is a very key element of healthy life, not simply for plants, but sunlight is like for photosynthesis also you need sunlight, but you also need sunlight not simply for photosynthesis. Humans also need sunlight for vitamin D production. Humans also need sunlight, but the right level of sunlight for also killing some bacteria and microbes naturally. And any time those conditions are missing is also the reason why, when right adequate balanced sunlight is not present in our home environment, in the environment where we are doing farming, in the environment where we might see a lot of vegetables growing, but you will also see those vegetables will either have mold problems. When with the hydroponics, I realized they have mold problems. But the second thing is they might still have some nutritional deficiency, like the greenery of those vegetables you will see is not as happy green color as the greenery of the same. Like, let's say you do an experiment of growing kale in environment with hydroponics, and where there is no sunlight at all, and then you raise kale in an environment where there is occasional sunlight but still lower level of sunlight, and you grow the same green leafy vegetable in environments there where there is good exposure to sunlight, and you grow it in an environment where there is lot of overexposure to sunlight. Do a comparison, you will understand which kale will taste better, look better, be healthy for you to consume. Anyone can do this experiment with kale, with any green leafy vegetable, to understand the merit of what I'm trying to explain, which is that a balance of sunlight needs to be there, a balance of cross ventilation needs to be there in our home environment or any hospitality industry environment. And if excess mold is there, then you also have to take the measures to clear the excess mold away from your environment. I hope this made sense, and if anyone has any questions or comments, please drop a question or comment. And realize that when you are facing multiple challenges, most of the time the multiple challenges can also, or some challenge where you were meant to do something different related to that challenge, at the time your higher purpose is to find the right solution to the challenge. And when you do indeed find the right solution, like how the farmer, the person who owns a land in Mexico did, and how this couple has, who don't own likely a lot of land, and that's why they were growing all these inside their homes only, has done. But now it's time that if they have the time and the energy and the resource, I would suggest these couples to start doing farming in an area where sunlight exposure is good. It will also help her in her cancer recovery journey, in both of them becoming healthier citizens. And if sunlight exposure is at the right adequate level, it will help them in and because they have been successful with farming, both of these combined together can help them in now producing those kind of foods which are much more balancing for them when they don't have cancer, when they don't have troubles associated with cancer causing you to have less home activities in your home environment. And in my previous video, in this video, I would also like to reiterate the third step every one of us has to do is to ensure that the water we use for growing our vegetables is of the purest quality. And the pureness of water doesn't simply again come from how air filtration devices is a temporary stopgap solution to air pollution problem, and the real solution comes from growing the right plants, keeping the right environment to ensure not high level pollution happens. So because when she had cancer, the other reason why her pollution levels dropped in her home is because she's not doing high intensity cooking. And when you're not doing high intensity cooking and she's not cooking those toxic vegetables which might have pesticides or other like using all those her spice content, also the cancer person's diet is usually boiled vegetables, raw healthy vegetables, right? It's all boiled food that you're eating. So you're not eating a lot of spice induced food, because if you put spice in your food, it can raise your inflammation levels. So because of which, if she wasn't consuming any spices, now while the spices will raise your inflammation in your body, but if you have seen the current news about Indian spices sometimes having toxic chemicals in them or pesticides in them, all these toxicity, cancer causing chemicals, pesticides, lead, all health harming chemicals are present in some of our masalas that we use for heavy rich cooking. So because of which again, The spices, if she reduce eating, if they reduce eating vegetables that are laced with chemicals, fruits that are laced with chemicals, all of these when we are cooking in our regular homes, Indian homes, that also raises the temperature both in the home environment when we are cooking, because those harmful chemicals when cooking and when heated will get dispersed in the air. That adds to the air pollution problem. Those harmful chemicals when cooked and then eaten then harms our body, so that also adds to your inflammation in your body. And that's why only, while the doctors don't know maybe always the deeper reasons why avoiding certain foods reduces the inflammation, now is the time to wake up to why avoiding certain foods reduces our inflammation content in our body. So that's why, if they understand this and now start, if they are going towards eating more than green leafy vegetables, going towards again eating some of the foods that they used to eat in the past, but instead of getting them from the store, by start raising them in a sunlight filled setting, like if you have a balcony or a terrace where you have access to sunlight, you can do some terrace rooftop gardening. Or if you have a square bit of land access also, you can do some gardening activities in a small bit of land as well. And I will post a video about rooftop farming being done in California, and I will talk about rooftop farming in my next video. But please look at that video as well, because that has good information on how you can do farming even with a small area of land. And with all farming, one thing I would like all farmers or home gardeners to realize: when you are growing a lot of vegetables and fruits and herbs for your health, or for distributing it to help with food and nutritional problems in your area, remember this: anytime your fruits and vegetables and flowers or herbs are starting to show a unusual color, unusual smell, unusual texture, unusual shape and size, unusual even histological conditions. Because histological conditions meaning, if you chop a tomato, when chopping a tomato, there are some tomatoes in recent years that I found in the market that looked very, very horrible. It looked very diseased, and while there was no visible mold in it, no visible fungus in it, it was growing very abnormally. So some tomatoes had a lot of seeds in them. Some tomatoes were 50% filled with seeds and hardly any tomato contents were there. So like that, they were like looking very diseased. Now, not being a botanist and not being a researcher in this, I do not know what was actually going wrong with the health of that tomato. All I know is it's a diseased tomato. Similarly, in that Mexico person's video, the jalapeno peppers, because I have eaten jalapeno peppers in US, I know how, not jalapeno, he had habanero peppers, and I think I said jalapeno in my previous video, so pardon me. The habanero peppers look a particular color, and now if the peppers don't look that particular color, they should have a particular shape as well. And if they are his peppers, instead of looking the typical orange color, orangish yellowish color is what it should actually look like, but it had this sickly color to it. Now the sickly color, this difference, if you start observing your food really minutely, you will realize the difference between how a healthy food looks, how a diseased food looks. And until someone does the actual research to show you why it is diseased, how it became diseased, if you are a farmer or a gardener, while you can wait 5 years, 10 years for some research work to show up why this is diseased, but if you intuitively develop the capacity to understand this is diseased and I should not eat it or I should throw it away, then you keep yourself safe, because part of health safety, and not just you keep yourself safe. If you are a gardener, well, I'm not doing gardening, if I get these tomatoes which are diseased, I should discard it, I should not eat it. If I eat it, then the disease in that will get transported to me. This is how people don't realize, but that is how bird flu, swine flu, combination of bird and swine flu has come into humans. Because when we do ignore that the bird we are eating is diseased and we still kill and eat it, even if I ignored it, but if I consumed it, or while killing it, the person who is doing the butchering job, or the farmer who is selling it, or the person who is doing the intermediate transportation of the chicken that might have bird flu, all of these places are the places where you are getting exposure now to the flu via inhalation as well as via consumption, and that is how you end up with the flu. Similarly, with swine flu also, the same steps, any step of the food chain process where people ignored when the flu was developing, didn't have understanding that a flu like condition is developing, and which happens when it happens when we do less mindful work. Because part of our experience of success in work isn't simply how much we have produced, but after you have produced a lot, in the first stages when you are in, let's say, if you understand this concept, I don't know, because I have been studying a lot of different degrees throughout my 20s to 40s. I understand this about learning, that when I was in school, getting grades was important to my parents, to my family, to everyone in my surroundings. So until my college days, until I am 22 years of age, when I did my bachelor's, having just good marks was the marker to show that I'm doing well in the subject. So if I had good marks, I'm great in that subject. If I had bad marks, I am bad in that subject. That is the norm people think about degrees. But only in the next 20 years or 22 years of my life, I realized that part of it is true, that obviously when you are in the beginning learner stages of life, at that time success is measured by how successful you are relative to others and how good you are doing in what you are doing. So meaning, when you are doing hydroponics farming, if you get a lot of good produce from the farming, that is your success level in the initial years you are doing farming. Be it hydroponics farming, be it any kind of other farming, be it any profession you pursue, like whether you are a cook, whether you are a businessman, whether you are a whatever you are in the world, in the first few years, in the first decade of your practice,